So this week is one for all you peat heads out there.
I actually went there with the intention of wanting to be a brewer. I always loved craft beer and I still do. So I spent a lot of my summers working at different distilleries, traveling around Scotland, seeing different distilleries.
We talked about Invergordon as well. So having worked in legendary malt distilleries to a grain distillery to an Indian malt distillery, it's quite a bit.
My favorite hobby would be collecting whiskies, I guess.
That's a good hobby to have.
And I remember, sucking an oyster in with all the Ardbeg, and it was just, I would say, an orgasm on the palate. Get some salty and iodine characteristics from the salty air of the Atlantic Ocean surrounding the distillery.
For me, the 10 is probably one of the best entry-level single malts out there in the market.
The Ardbeg Committee is the largest. We have 120,000 members worldwide. And the other market I handle is the Maldives, and I think this is the most unique market in the entire world. I'm very happy to announce that we will be getting WBC in India.
Oh, wonderful. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Discover series with the Whisky Advisor. I'm Uday Balaji. So this week is one for all you peat heads out there because we're off to Islay and we're going to be talking about all things Ardbeg with brand ambassador at Moët Hennessy, Shehan Minocher. Hey Shehan, how are you doing?
Great, thank you Uday. Thank you for welcoming me on the Discover series. Very excited to talk about Ardbeg today and share some stories.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you here, Shehan. Ardbeg is one of my favorite distilleries that I visited on Islay. And so guys, before we jump into it, as always, I'd like to request you to please like, subscribe and hit that little bell so you'll know every time we have one of these fun conversations in the series. So Shehan, this first question, what do you have in your glass?
Oh, that's Ardbeg, and that would be our 10-year-old.
Oh wow, I forgot to get my Ardbeg glass, but I'd probably fish it out a little later. So guys, I hope you have a glass, preferably an Ardbeg glass with some Ardbeg in it. And this is going to be a fun session. So cheers to all of you. Slanja.
Cheers.
So Shehan, the first question that I had for you was you're one of the young breed of Indian distillers who've graduated from Heriot-Watt. You've lived in Scotland, traveled across the country, and even in India, you've represented some real heavyweight brands. So I'd just love to know how a young man at your age has done so much and how your journey has been so far.
Very great. That's a great question, Uday. And it actually started off when I was still in school. So I grew up in Bangalore, and I was always exposed to wine, spirits, and gastronomy at a young age with both my parents being chefs. So I stumbled upon this course actually on Facebook of a Bachelor's of Science in Brewing and Distilling at Heriot-Watt. And I thought to myself, it sounds like everything I'm interested in. I love the sciences, and I thought this was a good way to apply that knowledge. So I applied to only one university when I graduated school, which was Heriot-Watt. And thankfully, I managed to get in, and I pursued my degree there. I actually went there with the intention of wanting to be a brewer. I always loved craft beer, and I still do. But when I reached Scotland and spent a little over 3.5 years there, I began to develop this passion and love for single malt Scotch whiskey. And that kind of just took over me, and I decided that's where I wanted to pursue my future. So I spent a lot of my summers working at different distilleries, traveling around Scotland, seeing different distilleries. I actually was very lucky to have the chance to work at White & Mackay under Dr. Richard Patterson. Wow. Who's a great master distiller, and I spent time at the Dalmore Distillery, at the Invergordon Distillery as well, and took a few tours. And actually, funnily enough, one of the tours I took was to Glenmorangie, which is another brand that I represent. And at the time, I thought of it as such a beautiful distillery. I really believed in everything I heard in the tour, and even applied for a job as a tour guide, which I did end up getting. But it was funny because the story comes full circle. Because I came back to India, decided to become a brand ambassador, which was new for me. I always studied the distilling side of things, or the brewing side of things, the technical side. So it was nice to come to a different part of the business and be able to share my knowledge with people all across the country and all over the world. So yeah, that finally brought me here to working with Moët Hennessy. And just before this, I had, I think, a very lucky opportunity to represent Paul John, which was an Indian single malt. So that really set me up, I think, for my career, and working with the indigenous brand is something I always look back fondly on.
That's fabulous. You talked about Invergordon as well. So, having worked in legendary malt distilleries to a grain distillery to an
Yeah,
Indian malt distillery, it's quite a bit. It's phenomenal experience. But just to step aside and talk about something a little fun for a moment, we do a rapid fire to just get to know you a little better. So,
sure.
when you're ready,
Yeah, I'm ready to go.
yeah. All right, your first whiskey.
Well, my first whiskey, Johnny Walker Black Label, I would say.
Favorite bar.
Favorite bar, there is actually a bar in Berlin. It's called Velvet.
Mhm.
It's not a whiskey bar, it's a cocktail bar, but I would say that would be my favorite bar right now.
Uh-huh. One more for the list there then. So favorite cuisine or food?
Oh, that's a very difficult one. I would say Indian food. I think it's the most diverse, and of course, it's home. So, yeah, Indian food would be my
Mhm.
favorite cuisine.
What about your favorite sport or hobby?
Difficult one now. My favorite sport would be football.
Mhm.
My favorite hobby would be collecting whiskeys, I guess.
That's a good hobby to have.
Yeah.
So is it cats or dogs for you?
Oh, another tough one there because I do love cats, but if I had to choose dogs,
Uh-huh. Books or music?
again, this is a very difficult one. Are they books or music? I will choose music because it's part of my daily routine. Books are occasional for me, at
Fair
least.
enough. Beaches or mountains?
Beaches, I would say.
Mhm. Coffee or tea?
Coffee, always.
Batman or Superman?
Ooh, Batman.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and this is a nice one. What's your favorite whiskey memory?
Yeah, there are quite a few favorite whiskey memories, but if I had to choose just one, interestingly enough, it was at Ardbeg a year or
Mhm.
so ago when I was visiting the distillery, and we had an amazing time there. But one of the things that I remember was we had fresh oysters, which were freshly caught right off the distillery, and they were brought
Mhm.
in. We shut them ourselves, and poured a little bit of Ardbeg into the shell, and I remember sucking that oyster in with all the Ardbeg, and it was just I would say an orgasm on the palate, something I never experienced before. So that would
Mhm.
be my all-time favorite whiskey memory because it just opened my world up to a new world of flavor. So
Mhm. No, it's funny that you mentioned Ardbeg as being one of your favorite memories because I had been to Isla a couple of years ago, and incidentally, I went to the distillery on one Sunday, and this was the beginning of November, right? So it's shut. But because there are no trespass laws in Scotland, you can walk wherever you want. So I was walking around the distillery, ended up going and sitting by the water, and with a Ardbeg warehouse on the side and all that, absolutely stunning. Ended up having a dram there. And coming from India, you wouldn't think that a place like that will literally have nobody sitting around and just you. But then the next day I went back, fantastic tour, extended tasting, had lunch at the Kiln Cafe with some more drams. It was absolutely fabulous. So I just love to know a little more about the Ardbeg history. And also, if you could tell us a little more about the distillery and why everyone should visit at some point.
great. So I'll start actually with the history because I think Ardbeg, of all the distilleries in Scotland, has one of the most unique histories and one of the richest histories as well. So it all started in 1815 when the distillery was founded by a guy called John McDougall. And John McDougall was a descendant of the Lord of the Isles, and that was the people who actually ruled the west coast of Scotland through the 1500s. So from its foundation in 1815 all the way to the 20th century, Ardbeg saw tremendous success. Our whiskies were exported all over the world as early as 1840 in New York, South America as well,
Mhm.
in different parts of Europe, and it began to develop this really strong fan following. And ultimately, it kind of ended in 1959 when the distillery left family ownership. So it was no longer with the
Mhm.
McDougalls and it went into different owners. And from that point on, the distillery began to see some economic decline as well as changes in ownership and not enough reinvestment back into the distillery. And
Mhm.
finally, in 1981, the distillery was closed. It was mothballed, and it stayed closed for 8 long years. And it was over those 8 years that I think really helped form the cult following that Ardbeg had, because a lot of people wanted to see the distillery come back, and a lot of our loyal fans really wanted to be able to buy Ardbeg again. And finally, in 1989, the distillery was reopened again, and for roughly a few years, it was on and off. The distillery was producing it sometimes, not producing it sometimes. And it was finally closed for the second time in 1997. And in 1990, it was actually closed in 1996. And then a year later, in 97, it was bought by the Glenmorangie Company, lock, stock, and barrel, despite the tumultuous history. And finally, Ardbeg was rescued. It was rejuvenated. And, as we say on Islay, it rose from the ashes like a phoenix and began its final rebirth. So today, it's, I would say, one of the most desirable single malt scotches, both for drinking and also for collecting. We have an incredible fan following, which I think we'll get into in a little bit as well. But about the distillery itself, we're located on the south side of Islay, near Port Ellen. So just down the road from us, which you know because you've been there, is Lagavulin and Lafroig. So I think it's one of the most magical roads in whiskey culture because you have three of the most famous Islay distilleries on the same road. And if you ever do go there, I think what kind of takes you back is it's not just a distillery. It's almost like a spiritual place because, walking around the distillery, you really feel the history, you feel the trouble that the distillery has been through, the resilience that it has when you go into the still room, even in the Kiln Cafe, which has been rejuvenated as well. When you talk to the people there, you see the passion, you see the heritage. In the distillery. And recently, actually, we doubled our capacity. So we had a little bit of work done where we added a new pair of stills. So now we've doubled our production capacity to keep up with the demand. And I'd say the most unique thing about our distillery is that we mature all of our whiskey on site. And what that does is it allows our spirit to be exposed to a really unique maturation condition. And that is actually where the whiskey is able to get some salty and iodine characteristics from the salty air of the Atlantic Ocean surrounding the distillery. So if anyone does get the chance, I would say it's a beautiful place to visit, a very spiritual place, especially for whiskey lovers. So one for the books for sure.
So I completely get what you're saying, So I actually walked from Port Ellen where I was staying up to the distilleries. Very distinct memory of the walk up, at least.
Yeah.
But talking about the taste of Ardbeg, and you mentioned the iodine and everything. Personally, for me, the 10 is probably one of the best entry-level single malts out there in the market, and the value that it provides is just absolutely phenomenal. But looking at a wider range, could you tell us about the other whiskies in the Ardbeg portfolio and what we have in India, both in domestic and travel retail?
Yeah, I would love to. So the great thing about Ardbeg is our portfolio keeps evolving. We have many limited releases, one-off whiskies that we keep creating because we are quite a quirky distillery. We like to push the boundaries of single malt Scotch whiskey. But some of the new whiskies that have been launched this year, one of them is Wee Beastie. Which is, I think, a huge moment for Ardbeg, and it's the first new addition to our permanent range, which we call Monsters of Smoke. So that is our 5-year-old whiskey. It's matured in a combination of Oloroso sherry casks and ex-bourbon casks. And at 5 years old, it's explosive, it's really smoky, but it also has a lot of complexity and nuances to it. So I think that's a beautiful way to recruit new people to drinking Ardbeg. We've also newly launched our 19-year-old. It's called Traivan. And that is also a combination of Oloroso sherry butts and ex-bourbon casks. So that's, really Ardbeg at its most elegant state. It's just, a beautiful dram where the smoke isn't as, I guess, aggressive as in a younger Ardbeg, but it has that smoothness and that lovely cloud of smoke that engulfs your palate that all Ardbegs do. But our core range, which is our permanent expressions that we have at Ardbeg, is first the 10-year-old. So that is our flagship, really the best embodiment of the Ardbeg house style. And that actually celebrating now 20 years because it was launched in 2000. So it's just about close to 20 years since the whiskey was first launched. And like you said, it's, I think, one of the best value for money whiskeys. It's non-chill filtered, which most other, commercially available 10-year-olds aren't. So it really preserves all that natural flavor that comes from, the distillation, but also the cask as well. And that is exclusively matured in first and second fill ex-bourbon casks. That is available in India pretty much, I think, in all major cities. You'll be able to buy it both retail and in many bars and hotels as well. Then we have 3 more whiskeys, which we don't sell in the domestic market here in India. They are only for travel retail. So they are available in Bangalore, Mumbai, Delhi, and a few other airports. And the first one in that range is Ano. So that actually, I have a bottle here, which I've just finished. So it gets its name, Ano, because it's inspired by a place in Islay called the Mull of O. And this particular whiskey has got 3 different casks used in its maturation. We have Pedro Jimenez sherry, we have Virgin American oak, and we have ex-bourbon. So it's a little bit lighter in terms of the smoke than the 10, but a really beautiful complex jam on its own. The next one is I would say, I don't like to say I have a favorite, but if I had to, I would say this would be it, and that's the Ugadal. And that gets its name from our water source, which is Loch Ugadal, which is set high above the hills near Ardbeg. And this is also Oloroso sherry and ex-bourbon. So it has that, beautiful smoke that's impactful, that's aggressive, but it also has those raisiny notes and dried fruits from the sherry. So beautifully balanced jam. I'm sure you've had your fair share of that one.
Just finished one, yeah.
And the last one is called Corrie Vrecken, and that is inspired by a whirlpool on Islay, which is also called Corrie Vrecken. And that is a combination of new French oak casks, which is not very commonly seen in Islay whiskies, and also ex-bourbon casks as well. So we've got, these, I would say, 4 whiskies, and with Wee Beastie again, 5 whiskies, part of our core range, permanent expressions from Ardbeg, which all in their own right, beautiful whiskies, but all stay true to our house style.
Got you. So I was actually at the London Whiskey Show last year, and the Trevan was on kind of like a special pole. They'll ring a bell every hour, and people line up in a massive crowd there to try it. It's absolutely beautiful. But what I really want to know is, are we going to get the Wee Beastie in India?
That's a great question, Uday. And I'm very happy to announce that we will be getting Wee Beastie in India.
Oh, wonderful.
We are expecting it in Q3 of this year. And it will be available in the domestic market. So that should be pretty exciting for Ardbegians and Ardbeg fans in India, because you'll get a younger Ardbeg, but also at a lower price point as well. So it should be very exciting for us and for all the people who want to drink Ardbeg as well.
Oh, I'm really looking forward to that. Wait, I'm going to be following up with you on that release. But talking about releases and talking about Ardbegians, there is a special club which gets some special releases which anyone can join, right? Could you tell us a little bit about the Ardbeg Committee?
Yes, fantastic. So I would love to tell you about the Ardbeg Committee. So actually on Islay, there are quite a few different whiskey committees, but the Ardbeg Committee is the largest. We have 120,000 members worldwide. So the committee was actually created with the intention for us as a brand to have a closer connection with our loyal fans, to engage with them and connect with them on a deeper level. And it was also created with the intention to ensure the distillery doors never close again. So despite anything that happens with ownership or any of that, we have the Ardbeg Committee who's always committed towards ensuring the whiskey flows out of the stills at Ardbeg. So what do members get as members of the committee? Well, first, it's free to join, as you said, but you get access to all the latest information from Ardbeg, dates on our new releases, new things that are happening at the distillery, updates on changes at the distillery. But most importantly, committee members get access to limited releases, exclusive releases, which are committee only. So these are very unusual bottlings of Ardbeg that normal consumers will not have access to. It's only sold online to our committee members. So they're quite rare. They're often collected pieces. And really, really unusual bottlings of Ardbeg. So I definitely would say if anyone likes peaty whiskies, if you like Ardbeg, it's a quick sign up online, and you will be able to not only learn more about the distillery, but get access to some really exclusive bottlings as well.
No, I second that, guys. I've been a committee member for a while now. If only we could get all the bottles directly in India, right?
Yeah, so
casks and stuff.
That is, I would say, one issue that we have is we're not able to get, as committee members, order the bottles to India due to, various different policies. But something I forgot to add actually is, if you do spend time being a committee member, what you do realize is people in the committee are fanatical Ardbeg fans. They're absolutely crazy about the brand. We have a lot of Ardbegians who actually get the Ardbeg A tattooed onto parts of their body. And we actually, recently heard about one gentleman, I think he's in Germany, if I'm not mistaken, who painted his house the same colors as the distillery. So really, really ardent fans, and we're really proud to have them love Ardbeg.
You should share that with me. I can put it up on social media for people to take a look at that house.
Yes,
maybe I'll get inspired. Who's to say, right?
Definitely.
Actually, lastly, what I'd love to know, Shan. So, one thing that I saw was you're not only the brand ambassador for Moët Hennessy in India, but also in Sri Lanka and the Maldives. So, I'm sure a lot of us would love to know more about the range of products that you handle, as well as what are these markets like? You know, we know India to an extent, but what are the Maldives and Sri Lanka like?
So, as I told you earlier, with talking about myself and my story, my passion and love was always single malt whiskey. But when I joined Moët Hennessy, I was super lucky to be exposed to such diverse and amazing historic brands. So today, I don't only represent brands in Scotch whiskey. I represent Ardbeg, I represent Glenmorangie, but also Hennessy, which is our cognac, Belvedere, which is our Polish vodka, and 5 different champagne brands, which are Moët Veuve Clicquot, Dom Pérignon, Krug, and Ruina. So I've got 9 brands that I represent, which is challenging at times, but I would say rewarding more than ever, because it's just the exposure to different types of consumers, different places, understand how people like to consume luxury products, but also get to learn about all these different categories. I never saw myself as a wine lover or
Mhm.
wine fan, but over the last few years, I've definitely developed a taste for champagne. So I also do, besides from India, handle 2 other markets, which is Sri Lanka and the Maldives. And these are
Mhm.
2 very unique places. And I'm very lucky that I get to explore these markets. So we'll start first with Sri Lanka, which I only actually visited once as a kid, as when I was very young. So I was
Mhm.
lucky to go back quite a few times now through my job. And it's a beautiful country with, I think, one of the best cuisines I've ever tasted. And actually, I think a lot of us in India, we mistake the fact that Sri Lanka is a lot like India, but actually, I'd say it's a lot closer, especially a place like Colombo, to an Asian city like Bangkok or Jakarta, than it
Mhm.
is to where I live now, a place like Mumbai. Um, but the thing I've noticed there is people love beer. Sri Lankan people, they love going out. They're extremely lovely people. They enjoy a good party as well. So one of our brands that does phenomenally well there is actually Belvedere. So Belvedere is, I think, the number 1 vodka in Sri Lanka now in terms of the luxury category, and also we do very well with Hennessy as well. So it's a good market for Hennessy and for Belvedere, but also for single malts and Scotch whiskey. Ardbeg is not very popular there, but we hope to change that soon. Um, and the other market I handle is the Maldives, and I think this is the most unique market in the entire world, because it's
Mhm.
not one place, or it's not one city or one country. It's, I think, 140 islands. I'm not sure on the exact number, but it's a lot of many different islands. And actually, it's illegal to sell alcohol or consume alcohol anywhere but a resort or a hotel. And all of these resorts are on individual islands all
Islands.
over. So the only way to travel between them is by boat or by seaplane. So what that means for us is actually most of the people who travel there end up staying for 5 to 7 days in a single resort. And if you're on a beautiful beach for 5 to 7 days, after some point you're going to want to enjoy a nice drink, whether it's wine or
Mhm.
whether it's spirits. So it's a huge market for luxury wines, especially prestige cuvées, so expensive and high-end champagnes. They sell very well there. Luxury still wines as well. We do very well in the Maldives, and especially with really high-end single malts. So our, I would say, extremely older and more aged Glenmorangies do very well
Mhm.
there. Our prestige cognacs from Hennessy do very well there. So it's really a place where you can sell the uber luxury products, and that, I think, makes it pretty interesting market.
Mhm. So there's a lot of honeymoons and celebrations going on
Yes,
for sure, yeah.
definitely.
So wonderful, Chance. It's been absolutely great having you. Thank you so much for being with us, guys. I'm going to put Chan's details down in the description below, so you can get in touch with him and ask him all questions. Ardbeg and Glenmorangie and Moët Hennessy. But what I'll also do is I'll put in more details about these brands, and I've also linked the Ardbeg YouTube channel up here for you guys to check out. So all these new releases, you're going to know about it first. And so, Shayan, thank you so much for thank you so much for being here with us. And I'm going to say, cheers.
Cheers. Thank you, Uday. Thank you for having me. Cheers.
Our pleasure. Guys, that was an absolutely fun conversation with Shehan. We traveled all the way up to Islay and ended up to the Maldives, so that was quite a journey. So, as always, I've got to ask you guys to please like, subscribe, and hit that little bell so you'll get notified every time we have another video in the series. So, until next week, cheers.